All right, if I can get a motion to come out of recess and we'll resume our committee of the whole meeting.
Motion to come out of recess.
Second.
I have a motion from Councilman Merrill and a second from Councilman Holmgren. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. That motion carries 5-0. So we'll jump back into E5, building inspection fees and fee schedule changes. All right.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
I guess while we were sitting here and I was thinking more about this, I wanted to start with this if I might. It's not uncommon for fees to stay quite low for a quite period of time. Nobody likes to raise fees. So it's not uncommon for fees to stay artificially low for an extended period of time. Again, we've worked in a number of jurisdictions over the years that we've seen that. And there's nothing more difficult than raising the fees a great amount at any certain time. So now that the fees would be getting to where I think they should be in order to run a program, then they incrementally would, in the future, would only have to be raised a little at a time, if, at all, because I want to talk to you more about what we're doing with remote virtual inspections. Remote virtual inspections is something that was really born out of COVID, when there were a lot of concerns over being in people's homes and not being, really, we didn't know if the world was going to stop spinning or not. So we were jumping on that bandwagon pretty early. So now with Rum River, we're looking at the efficiencies of that. You have less in drive time, less danger on the road, a lot of reasons, more convenient for the contractors as well, of course. So we're looking at that as a means to help control costs in the future. But again, looking back at the fees here, $50, $75, $80, that hasn't sustained itself for some time. So get these fees up to where they should be, and then going forward, we can make sure that we're really good governors and stewards of that by instituting remote virtual inspections, grouping inspections together. And again, looking at those fees, if they have to go up, when they have to go up, they go a little bit at a time, instead of waiting several years, because this is with a difficult conversation, if the fees hadn't really been kept in pace with the cost of insurance, vehicle transportation, things of that nature. So that's what I wanted to get out first, is just to let you know that this is something that we can control going forward with other mechanisms.
I guess, when was the last time we raised our fees for this type of thing?
My recollection is, we don't change them very often since I've been here.
It's been a while.
Yeah.
Been a long time.
Yeah. Like how long? Like,
Wholesale change? I don't know that we've
well,
done
you've been here a long
wholesale.
time. It's hard for you to remember. Huh?
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's been quite some time. I'm not gonna say, 5 years, it could be 8 years.
Yeah.
It's been a while.
Yeah.
It's been a long time.
Josie, do you know the answer to that by any chance? When was the last time we raised our building inspection fees or building permit fees and stuff?
We had a minor, just a couple things that we changed when we first accepted Rum River Consultants as our building official services in 2021, I believe. Very minor. And at that time, it was discussed that we should be raising more of them, but they worked with us to keep it low and keep our percentage low, which is what we had previously when we had a building
Okay.
contracted services. But prior to that, it hadn't been much.
And that was just a minimal raise at that time, even when we did it in
Right, we could look
2021.
back and see, it was just very few changes that we did. Yep.
Well, I get complaints currently that our fees are too high, and I'm definitely not in favor of raising them. I understand it costs more to do business, but, I mean, it was also agreed in 2021 when this RFP was sent out that these were our rates. And to see these types of changes on everything over just a 3-year period, I just can't get behind it. And I worry that it's gonna cause more detriment to us as a city and the infrastructure than not. So I don't know if maybe we're just out of touch with how much stuff costs, and I don't know if we can get a second opinion or how that works, but
In his defense, these aren't that bad.
well,
I'm gonna tell you right now, a lot of cities, and I'm not gonna say Minneapolis or St. Paul, most cities, plumbing permit for a 3-bathroom house is $3,000.
Well, don't tell them that.
No, I know, but his is already theirs is a flat rate. Most cities are charging per fixture units. They're only charging per fixture units in multi-dwellings, large multiple dwellings, commercial applications. And that's just in a residential home. Most building permits by the time they're said and done, is a lot more than what these are. And I mean, my complaint was on permit scheduling is when somebody's already in the home and they wanna finish the basement, they wanna add the deck, that's where we wanna be very, very, very competitive, because I want those people to pull that permit. Because believe it or not, you go to sell a house, a real estate agent's going to ask if there was permits pulled on those jobs being done. And I didn't know that, well, I suppose about 8, 9 years ago, 10 years ago? No, it's more than that, but I didn't realize that. And if you didn't have a permit on it, you can't, they will not value that work that was done. So, and most people aren't gonna be aware of that. The building of, you know, what they're going at on some of this is what it would be generally is a new construction. I think we need to look at that basement finish, you know, the decks being put in. Those are the things that I would see as wholesale rather than that, in my opinion. Because if somebody's building a house, it's built into the cost of that home. That permit cost isn't gonna mean nothing. But it's that one that the homeowner's gonna do it. I'd rather see him get that permit pulled. Because I tell you what, most people are gonna say, I'm doing it in my basement at night and weekends and nobody's gonna know about it.
Yep.
If I might, Mayor and Council, that's a very good point, and that's why we've grouped them together. If a homeowner's pulling a basement finish permit, it's inclusive of the plumbing and the mechanical. So there, again, we're students of this. We've been doing this for a long time. And I feel very comfortable the way we're grouping these permits together for the basement finishes. We also have maximum fees in there for accessory buildings and basement finishes. Decks, in the effort of transparency, we've been very clear about the valuation of those square foot. And some people have different opinions as far as what that looks like. But again, in the effort of transparency, we're putting it right out there, what the valuation is per square foot, you know, for a finished, for a basement versus a deck versus whatever the project might be. And then also on that same point is there are a number of jurisdictions that are looking at maintenance permits as value-based, which is incredibly expensive. Whereas we've taken the approach that a roof is a roof is a roof, residential. That's why that's a set fee. So we've used 1,300, Minnesota rules 1,300, to everybody's advantage to make sure that we're not overcharging. So I feel very comfortable speaking to any of these.
And if I might also add, dovetail onto what Mr. Schrader was commenting on, for example, the basement finish, that we're currently, there's a flat fee of that $300. And what we're proposing here is that maximum fee of $500. But in your current schedule, you still need to get those other plumbing and mechanical permits, which accumulate up to another $150. So that actually brings it up to $450. Where we're saying it's a maximum of $500, and it will have that mechanical and plumbing included in that. So I do understand, Councilmember Merrill, that from the optics, and maybe we could have done a little bit better job of explaining, they are increased, but there were some fees that were adjusted to help balance that out, along with adding in that valuation data table, which again provides that transparency to your community as far as what those valuations are being, what the square feet is being valued at for each of those identified projects. So there isn't a surprise on those permits.
And it also simplifies the permitting process for those homeowners who aren't as familiar with the permit process by only pulling one permit and not 3.
I would say that the majority of the fees that we are proposing to be raised are those flat fees. And that's going from that $80 to the $125. To get that fee with, again, meeting Minnesota rules, commensurate with the service that's provided.
I'm not sure what electrical fees are going through the state, but it looks, okay, so the city of Isani has their own charge for having their electric. If they put in a box, a circuit or anything, it looks like the city, you have to go through the city to get a permit. Can't they go through the state to get a permit?
They are.
Is that state
That's
regulated?
a state
These
inspector.
are state prices?
Yeah,
Yes.
Wow, they went up over the years.
They went up this year. also. So these increases are to match what the state is doing. Cambridge and ISANI share an electrical inspector, and their rates will be exactly the same.
So the $130 isn't above and beyond what the state fee would be? Because I always remember it being $55, somewhere in there.
It used to be lower, but it's increased because now they're adding on other, like, service charges to these fees as well at the state level because of the number of state-required inspectors that they're having specifically in the metro area. So I don't know if Andy and Carrie can speak to it more, but I've specifically worked with Eugene Boyle, who's our electrical inspector on this, and so that is where this came from.
So am I seeing this
And
right?
he's a very reasonable electrical inspector. I think Mr. Becker can speak very fondly of that. So he does a great job for us and has for a while.
So if somebody wants to add a 30 amp circuit to a room they're, let's say, gonna make into a bar, and gonna put a refrigerator and a few things in there that might run a little bit more, it's gonna be $130 plus $12?
That's not my lane to swim in, Mayor and Council. I really don't want to speak to the electrical because again, that's not my area of expertise.
Okay, so you're not doing any,
I can maybe address that a little, Councilman McKinney, if you'd like.
Yeah, you guys, you can talk however you want to talk. You don't have to ask me every time.
The minimum permit fee for that would be $65 plus the surcharge. So that service rate at the very top of that table, again, this table is very similar to our table that we have on that front page, where it's matching those state fees. And so it's, if someone's going to add just an outlet, it would be that it has to have that minimum permit fee, plus anything additional. And I don't know if Mr. Boyle had communicated,
Yes, that is how, exactly.
but Mr. Schrader's right, not only to swim in, but just it's our experience that there always is gonna be that minimum fee.
yeah, I'm just trying to make sense of these fees and how they're working. Like, on an average, how many, let's say, water heaters within the city of Isani are replaced? Do you have even a clue, in any given 1 month period?
I would be guessing, and I don't like to guess. If you'd like those numbers, I can certainly provide that. For instance, if you'd like to see what the number of water heaters per month, that's, so through baseline, that's an easily obtained number.
But I will tell you this.
Most people just pull permits.
Well,
Most people aren't gonna pay.
he's grouping them together, and my idea is if you're have an average of 5 or 6 a month, then like you said, if you do them all in one day and you charge a lower fee, you're still doing really well.
But the problem is they're not gonna get them all in one day. You may have a water heater that's leaking right now, that's gonna get changed now, and my guess is the chances are there ain't a permit pulled on it.
Takes too long.
It's not just
Costs
that,
money.
it's just, they're gonna run in, grab it. I mean, they're not driving around looking to see whose plumber structure is sitting out in everybody's driveway. So, say you called me up and said, Steve, I need a water heater, my water heater's leaking all over. I go up there, okay, let's run up to Menards, go grab one, come back, we'll throw it in for you. You gonna call them?
Right.
So that's what I'm saying is, so, but that, he's not getting 6, 8 a week. It would be onesie, twosie, threesie. By right, it should be calling in a permit.
Well,
Odds
that's-
are, it's not happening.
On some of these things that could be considered, you know, life-threatening, then maybe we should be lowering the prices on basic maintenance items, that's all. Like
I don't
water
care
heaters or-
if you gave them a $5 charge for that permit still isn't gonna get pulled, because they don't wanna take the time to do it.
Probably right.
You know, we have gals in our office, like today, I went to on a call, first call I made this morning. Water heater was leaking. I gave her a quote. She didn't like it. She called somebody else while I was still there. She says, go ahead, put it in. I put it in. It's done now, but the gal in the office got the information that it was installed. She sent it in a permit application. So as we do change things out, furnaces in existing homes, water heaters, all that, if Apollo will pull the permit, okay, like the company I work for, we're pulling the permit, but we forward the permit information onto the homeowner because we are not there and we do not know their schedule. But the permit's pulled. If they don't contact the people and say, hey, you know, permit, that's kind of on them. But it's already been pulled.
And if I might, this is just such an interesting topic to me, because the best thing we can do is make this process easier and keep it reasonably priced. So with the remote virtual inspections, we're rolling out a program, hopefully here in the spring, where we're gonna be available at a moment's notice while you're still there. While you're still doing the installation. We can connect with a live virtual inspection while you're there. So we're not troubling the homeowner again. So that's what makes us, trying to, again, accommodate the homeowner and the contractor. So to remove those barriers, so people don't see it as an inconvenience. They don't see it as expensive.
Some cities are still using remote. They cut staff, whatever.
Well, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, you think about
It's-
how
but
many
it
more
is-
inspections could you get done in a day?
But,
And then you have,
but
yeah.
I'll be honest with you,
Yeah,
It's not as
a
good.
simple furnace change out is an easy thing. But for me to walk into a job on a new construction home and walk around my phone for 45, 50 minutes, because the inspector's gotta look at this and I'm trying to hold the phone or the iPad or whatever, it's a pain. As a contractor, it's a pain in the butt for me to do. But to do a virtual one like that, it isn't much different than me submitting pictures of the completed job, and they have them. We've done that for inspections in the cities also. They sometimes accept photos. If the inspector knows you, a lot of times they're gonna say, you're good. One of our inspectors we had here from Minspec, I still see him on jobs. And I'll call him up and say, hey, Carl, I got this job, here it is, blah, blah, blah. He'll walk in and he says, I better stay here for about 10 minutes, I know your work, I know you're good. But I gotta at least show I'm here for this amount of time. You get to know your guy you're working with, he knows he's not gonna screw you over, they're gonna work with you. Okay, plain and simple. But that point is, there's gonna be a lot of permits that aren't getting pulled, and there is nothing he can do about it, you can do about it, I can do about it. It's, people are gonna be nature. I don't care, like you said, if you lowered that water heater cost to $5, they still ain't gonna pull it.
I guess
I don't even see a need on a replacement like that. Doesn't make sense to me.
it doesn't
but-
make sense at all.
Technically, by state code, if I change your faucet in your house, I'm supposed to get a permit.
What?
That's,
Technically.
And it's really an interesting conversation, we'll maybe have a cup of coffee one day, is, looking at the plumbing code when you're changing or re-altering drain, waste, and vent and water lines, absolutely, permits are required. Changing out fixtures and faucets, I've taken the approach, looking at that to say, no, a permit is not required. Like in Coon Rapids, when I worked there years ago, Jim Richter, I don't know if you remember Jim, he was adamant about getting a permit for a stool because of the shut-off. I said, goodness sakes, just because there's code criteria doesn't necessarily mean that rises to the level of needing a permit. Jim and I talked about that at length. But nonetheless, there are rules there for a reason, and some are open to interpretation, and that's why, the industry professionals and the code officials, we talk about this. What's the best approach? How can we make sure that we're available for homeowners, and we make sure that we're there for contractors as well? That's our profession, that's what we do.
I mean, you'd be surprised with the amount of things that, and there's probably stuff in the building code that he probably disagrees with, as well as I would myself, because it's kind of overboardish. It's kind of redundant, or it's something that really doesn't make sense, but it's in the code, you gotta follow it. And he has to enforce that, as much as he wants to or not. It's dumb. The international code, like when you talked about International Building Code, IBC, they have a IPC, International Plumbing Code. So they made all our codes supposed to be all intertwined. But the state of Minnesota is a hybrid. So another state will not accept my Minnesota State Master's license in another state, because our code is a hybrid. It's dumb. Why did we adopt it and change it when we're not being able to reciprocate in other states?
So I have a question here, just devil's advocate, if we were to just say no to these fee changes, what would happen?
We'd have to reevaluate how we provide the services, really.
Okay. I guess I understand and appreciate everything you guys have said, but I don't really, I want to make sure that we are going in the right direction, and I trust what you're saying, but I don't at the same time, because it's your incentive to make money, and I want to make sure that we're making the best decision for us. So I guess I would like to see if we can get other ideas on what other people are charging. I don't know how we go about doing that in RFP or whatever. no offense to you guys, but I would just like to make sure that we're making the best long-term decision, because I know for a fact that we are going to continue to get more and more complaints about the cost of permits. And that's my opinion, so.
I don't think there's any easy solution to this, you know, and the prices haven't gone up more than the cost of living has over the last 3 years. I understand that. I mean, we can beat this up all day long, and I don't think there's a solution to this.
I don't think going out and asking for other pricing, I'm gonna be honest with you, I don't think they're all that outrageous. My complaint was for the smaller items, like the basement finishes and the decks. Cause that is what's gonna bring him into the house. He's going to get that inspection, so those people are gonna get satisfied. Most of these pricings that he has in here, the increases are for the new construction. That is price of doing business. And if the contractor puts more money on top of that permit fee, that's on him. That's not on you or I, and most people aren't even gonna see it because it's built into the cost of it. You could reach out for months and months and months in doing this, and you're never gonna find anything that's gonna satisfy you. My biggest complaint was the cost of the decks and basement finishes.
Which that was one thing that I was gonna bring up too, is I haven't, been looking through here, but, so the deck fees, we talked at length about that, you know, of course, and I can't remember what the pricing was on it. Was it
$41 per
40?
square foot on composite, I think you had said.
And right now, if you look at it, it's $45 a square foot.
And another question I had, these valuations, that all includes labor, and I don't think it should include labor. I mean, if a homeowner wants to save themselves some money, and I get that for you guys, it's the same amount of work, whether a homeowner or a contractor does it or whatever, but at the same time, people feel like they're being violated when they say if they spend $2,000 on materials to save themselves from paying a contractor, and then you come and say, well, we're gonna charge you for that anyway. To me, it doesn't feel right.
I understand your point.
Yeah.
That's not discretionary, though. That comes right from the state. The state valuation is to include material and labors, so that's not something that we.
We've never done it that way before here, though.
Pardon me?
We've never done it that way here before, though, when we had our own official that did these things. It wasn't per valuation, so it can't be, I mean, we never got in trouble for it.
I think he was doing it by valuation also, but there was other whatevers.
Okay.
But if you go back to here, value of the work, if I figure it out at the value cost, so $2,000 to $2,500, that 16 by 16, or so let's say it's $16,000 for the cost of the deck. You figure it out, that permit would be $315.20. But now if you go back to the other one where he's saying it's square footage, 16 by 16 deck, at $45 a square foot, that's 1,104 square feet, is $496.80. So which one are you going by? If you're going by the dollar valuation, or you're going by what you want to charge per square foot?
Oh, yeah.
And that's a heck of a difference.
And just to clarify, we go off of what is in here, not what is on the application. So if a contractor fills out the application for a building permit, and they identify the value of that deck at $16,000, that's why we are encouraging the city council adopt this table that we have in here, so that provides transparency, that we're not picking and choosing the higher value of whatever is on there, as some communities choose to do. We don't operate that way. We operate by a standard, uniform process such as this, where it's valued at $45 a square foot.
And I guess I could live with that, you know, the valuation of 2,000 to 25,000 at that permit cost of $315.20. I could live with that, but I can't live with that $45 a square foot thing. Because ultimately, is like I told Andy earlier, is my deck cost me this, $0. A guy owed me favors, and he's paying for it. I'm doing all the work myself. My time's worth nothing. In my house, my time's worth nothing. If I'm going to your house, it's worth something, but in my house, it's worth nothing. Plain and simple. So to tell me that my deck's worth $45 a square foot. Now, once the deck is done and inspected, now I gotta deal with the county because they're gonna raise my valuation of my property because of that deck. So that $45 a square foot, I mean, I hate to say it, I'm not trying to cut hairs, but 315 to 497, there's a big dollars difference. I might be able to go out for dinner once. I mean, that's just the way I look at it. If you're gonna go out that evaluation, I can live with that, personally.
And remember, we're obligated by our licensing, State Department of Labor and Industry, to follow the code. Chapter 1300, those are our guidelines. Valuation is material and labor. You know, when you charge a plan review fee, plans are required. So there are boundaries, and it's right out there, Minnesota Rules 1300. It's not that painful of a read, you know, it doesn't take that long, but I'd encourage all of us to look through there, so you can see where my obligations are too. They hold my license, much like the state holds your license. I'm obligated to do these things, and if others got by with doing them differently, or not adhering to the rules, that's up to them. And you said something earlier, Councilmember, I'd like to address as well. Rum River, we're not in business to make money. We're in business to stay in business. That allows us to make short-term decisions for longer term. We're in the relationship business. That's what we're doing. We're in business to stay in business. And again, I've got over 40 jurisdictions under my belt now. And we've got a real good handle on how this relationship with councils, the residents, as well as with the state. So there's reasons for this, and if there's any questions, I'd love to talk more about this. Because again, there's reasons for these rules, and I feel very, very comfortable in explaining those.
I guess the residents that I've talked to feel differently. They think that the charges are too high and that you guys are too strict on stuff. And that's all I can go based off of,
And
which,
I appreciate that, but
Yep.
remember, the codes are a minimum.
Mhm.
We're being too strict on the minimum, life safety for worst-case scenarios. And
I
minimums.
understand, I understand.
There is no way of being too strict on the minimums. There's not. You know, if that guard has to withstand 200 pounds, and we want to make sure that somebody's not going to fall down and go boom, there is no way to be too strict on code minimums. Safety glazing, egress, getting people in and out, there is no minimum on that, or there's no being heavy-handed on minimum standards. I don't see that. And if there's other ways to approach the fees, we're all ears. You know, again, this is where our experience brings us to.
And I think one of the ones you brought up, there might have been a misunderstanding, and there was a misunderstanding in another one that was brought up in here, and I'm not going into specifics. So, I mean, there's misunderstanding. It's also his job to educate people on things. How they interpret that education is one thing. It's like I had at a person's house today, and the guy says, "Can you teach me how to be a plumber?" I said, "Yeah, I can teach you how to be a plumber, but if you don't retain the information, it doesn't do me any good teaching you." You know, so, I mean, you have to, maybe they need to approach it differently. Trust me, I've had inspectors that I've laid into and argued them with code. But I also learned one time, a long time ago, careful, he's the one that's gonna pass me or fail me.
If I might throw this out there, you might appreciate this as well, as I'm not much of a sports guy, but I like the sports analogy in the sense that the building inspectors, we step up to the plate with 2 strikes against us. You are mandated by law to buy this product, a permit. Not only are you mandated by law to buy that product, you're mandated to buy it from me. So again, when we step up to the plate, we have 2 strikes against us because as a customer, as a consumer, you're mandated by law to buy the product and you have to buy it from me. So we're kind of working out of a hole in a lot of respects that way because we're telling you how to work on your deck, in your deck. That's your biggest financial and emotional investment. So look at it from that perspective. We're here to help you as well as the next person that owns that home.
Well, I guess I had a couple questions, so this is more for the staff, but you had mentioned that Cambridge would have the same fees, which Cambridge, you guys do Cambridge as
Just
well,
for
right? or-
electric.
Just for electric, okay,
Yes,
gotcha,
sorry.
for Eugene, okay.
Specifically for Eugene.
Okay, gotcha. So where do we, you know, if we were to adopt these fees, where does that put us in comparison to surrounding communities and that type of thing? Or I don't know if we have that info or not, but,
I don't have that info offhand this time,
Okay.
but I don't know if you guys can speak to that at all, but.
I guess, I mean, I don't know that we're necessarily in a huge hurry to get this passed, are we, or kind of, or yes, no? I mean, is it?
Well, we can't pass it tonight, no.
Well, no, I know, that's what I'm saying, I mean, but I mean, were you hoping to get it like on the next council meeting, or can we bring this back to Cal with maybe a little bit more, in-depth look at how it
Yeah,
compares and stacks up?
We can do that.
Okay. Not to say that we can't make a decision tonight, but that would be one thing I'd like to see, I guess, is how do we compare to other cities? And then, let's see. Steve, you had mentioned that, the decks, obviously, I mean, and I don't know, obviously you're mandated to go off of the valuation, it sounds like, right? So, I mean, but then the 45 a square foot, explain to me again. I know we talked about it before, and I'm a little dense, so.
That's fine. So I did a fair amount of digging on this from Home Advisor, Voyager Exteriors, Trex Cost Calculator, Angie's List, as well as Home Depot. And that $45 is a really good average, because that's what we need to do. We can't we can't price out each project necessarily. So when you look at 5-quarter cedar or green treat or brown treat, is the more economical way of building a deck. And then you can go up to the composites, Trex and Nudura, some of the different composites, that's the higher end. So what we're trying to do is even that out, trying to find that middle ground. And $45 is right in the middle, because more often than not, we see a range from $30 to $60 a square foot, material and labor, to build that deck. So $45, I feel very comfortable with that. Now again, when the composites, they're a little bit higher than this, they are a little bit more involved, but we're already engaged with the project. We're looking at the stair material, we're looking at the guards, are those compliant guardrails as well as the stairs themselves? So we're already engaged with the project, so as long as we can kind of level out that playing field, that's what our goal is.
Okay.
So,
So it's by valuation, but the valuation is just simply an average of
Correct.
what you might have per square foot of an average,
Right,
so,
I think it would
okay.
be very cumbersome to have two. If you were to have one for wood decks and one for composite decks, that would be, administratively, that would be more cumbersome.
Sure.
And that would also make decks with composite material a little bit higher than what we would want them to be.
Okay. Well, that made a lot more sense today. I don't know why. Last time we talked, I was sitting here just going, what? I don't get it. And
well, I don't understand it.
No, you don't understand it? So
No, I don't understand why it costs more, because you're doing the same exact inspection, whether it's wood or plastic.
There are more things involved with composites. Some composite material are made for flower pots, some for furniture, some for decks. When you come to the composites, Trex and some of the others, they're made for decking, but not for stair treads, because there's a different loading on stair treads. You have to withstand a 300-pound point load at any point in the stairs themselves. So the stair jacks have to be a lot closer, depending on the milk jugs and sawdust they make the composite out of. So composites are fantastically more complicated than wood.
Okay.
Because not all composites are approved for stairs or guards. Some are only the decking. So getting into the evaluation service report from the manufacturer, that's where we get all that good information on the composites. So
As-
they are quite a bit different.
As a percentage, how many composite decks versus wood? Because I feel like you're gonna have a lot more people that are just building a wood deck. And so you're actually gonna be doing better off, because that average doesn't actually average out to 45. Maybe it's more like 36, because substantially more people build a wood deck than a composite deck.
I don't have those statistics, and that's getting pretty granular, in that sense, and I don't know how to approach that, other than to deal with the average that's the best for everybody.
I think it's the best for you, because you guys can, if you do less composite decks, you make more money. But I don't think that's the best for the people, so, and I don't mean that rudely, but as a percentage, I think it'd be better if we were to split it.
I could put
But
it in perspective.
if I'm listening to him rightly, they're gonna go off the valuation of the deck, not what materials they're using. That's why I said I could get on board with that, because a $2,000 and $25,000 valuation equates to a $16,000 deck, equates to $315.20 for the permit, versus the $45 a square foot that he's valuation at, that's $496.80. So if they're going by the valuation of the cost of the deck.
That's because yours is not wood.
Doesn't
So-
matter. It's gonna go back to that evaluation, no matter what.
But a valuation on a wood deck is different than a valuation on a composite
He's
deck.
going by the valuation.
Well, the formula is gonna give you a different number for each.
Oh. If that deck cost you $10,000 in wood or $16,000 in composite, he's going off that valuation, $2,000 to $25,000.
Average, which is correct.
I'd like to see
The
a tier.
evaluation is 45 regardless of the material.
Well, but why does it
That's
work
what I'm
out
saying.
difference? If I go by the square footage of it versus the valuation, there's that much difference.
I know, but that's what he's saying, that the average, so that they're required to do a valuation, but they don't actually have to do a valuation on every single property, or every single deck, I mean, sorry. So the 45 is the average, so that is the valuation that you've assigned to every square foot, regardless of the material. So they're not gonna come and look at your wood deck and say, okay, this one's lower than the 45, so we're gonna go with the valuation. They're not gonna do a valuation, it's just gonna be the 45, because that's the average, right?
Correct, and that's the thing, that's the ironic part about the code, is that they tell us that you shall, which is a directive, give the building department an estimated valuation for us to get started with. But then at the end of the day, they also tell us that we need to be fair and equal commensurate to the service. So it's really a balancing act, if you will, and this is a really good example of that, is looking at that $30 to $60 range, the different needs, the different sizes, and in order to be fair to the city, to the elected officials, as well as to the department itself, that's where we've arrived at the 45.
But it's not fair because the people that have a wood deck are paying for more for the people that have a composite deck.
Exactly.
And that's not fair.
And they're subsidizing. I mean, somebody who can afford to have that more expensive deck isn't gonna worry about the price of the building permit as much as somebody who's just trying to scrape enough green-treated wood together to build himself a nice little platform in their backyard and enjoy themselves.
again,
So
I've always
I
looked at
think
this
there
as-
should be maybe a
It should be different.
two-tier.
In what way?
The composites are 55 and the wood are 35 or something like that per square foot, because that's what it
Yes.
actually comes down to. It's not, you can't take an average and apply it to everything, because like I said, there's a lot more people that build decks out of wood. So that average in the middle, while it sounds good, it's good for you, but it's not good for the people that aren't building composite, because they're paying that difference on that.
Okay, well, here's a different one now too, since we're getting so deep into the decks, is the new steel decks. There's a C stud, a powder-coated steel stud deck. That's gonna make that price, so should we have another tier for that?
Yes.
Really?
I wouldn't want one.
What, a
I did-
steel deck?
Nope.
Oh, yeah, but that's not what we're talking about. We're
No,
talking
I'm
about,
just saying,
yeah.
I'm just saying right now, I wouldn't have it. I built houses that were steel built. The floor was bouncy as bounce could
Now,
be.
they also have other decking materials that are made out of concrete. So we could go all day on this and have a number of different tiers for decks. There's more than just two types of decks.
Right.
There's more than just wood and composite. There's steel stud, there's concrete paving on them, there's low slopes. There's a lot going on with decks. But again, in the interest of everybody's administration of the code, this is what was established by the state. This is, again, what we've seen in 40 other jurisdictions. So I don't know that we need to reinvent the wheel, if you will, or get that granular, because if you dissect anything, you're gonna find a little bit of disparity in there. I get that. What we're trying to do is serve you and the residents to the best of our ability.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I think as far as the fee question, I mean, I'd just like to see some comparables from other cities to see how this stacks up. The rest of it, I mean, I don't think that you guys are trying to pull a fast
No,
one on
I don't think so
somebody,
either, but
You know, I mean, and I wanted to say too, I mean, you guys do a really, I mean, and to those complaints and stuff like that, I've had complaints too. You're always gonna have complaints about
Mm-hmm.
inspectors. I mean, that, it just is what it is. I mean, it's, you're never gonna get away
we
from
had a
that.
lot less with our own inspector.
No,
From what I heard, unless it's just a,
Look at the look on
sheer
their
change.
faces.
no.
no? Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
so
I've
you
heard a
maybe-
lot
maybe
less
you-
from,
Maybe you
yeah,
heard less, but at the time, but,
at the time.
but I mean, when we had Minspect, it was.
Oh, Minspec was horrible. I'm saying when we had our own building official,
No,
it seemed to be
Minspec
No,
less.
but even, I mean, even then, there was still.
Minspec was an issue because it
Minspec
was
was-
months before permits would
Yeah.
be issued, and that I will not tolerate that.
No.
If they did that, I'd be yelling at him just as much as I did Minspec. There's no reason that it takes 3 months to get a building permit out, none.
If you would like, Mayor and Council, to look at some comparables, if you're gonna ask staff or us to do a comparable to other cities, that's an understandable quest. But remember that the code is meant to have fees orchestrated to the service, not what other people do. Because some other cities may choose to subsidize them. Some cities, Blaine, for example, they chose to do a set fee for decks. That's directly contrary to Minnesota code. Don't know how they get by with that. Because when you require plans, a plan review fee is required, therefore you go by valuation. So how how is it down in Blaine, how they get by with that, I'm not sure. But that's just to show that, just to make a comparison to another jurisdiction doesn't make it a valid comparison. Just wanted to warn us of that.
Well, and ultimately, development needs to pay for itself. Development, improvement, all of those things. So the city of Blaine has that well-established commercial tax base where they can subsidize the permit. They're in the red. You take staff salary and maintenance and overhead and all of that and dial that in, and I don't know what they're charging for a deck, but that's being subsidized by new construction permits or other permits or just plain old tax base.
And the danger with
Because they
that,
have a big tax base.
and the danger with that is a 15 by 30 deck is the same as a little 10 by 10 entry. So that's overpriced and that's underpriced. So that's why the valuation is much more equitable.
I suggest we just get some comparables and then bring them back to Cal.
I'm curious to see what Blaine is doing.
This,
We contract with Blaine. We have inspectors down there, sometimes 2 or 3 inspectors during the course of the year to help them out. And they're busy. I mean, the rate that they're growing is amazing. Their commercial, like you say, Carrie, is that their commercial tax base, their commercial growth helps even out a lot of wrinkles.
Yeah, no, and that is certainly an idea but I mean, you'd have to have an awful lot of growth to be able to.
Well, I don't wanna
you mean
be-
just to
I
get
don't
around
wanna
this,
become
this,
Blaine, but
just
I
to get
wanna-
around the state, how they're doing that, you're saying? Yeah, because a lot of these things, I feel like from the state, it's like, well, they say these things and they say these things and they say them and you'd hear them and you hear them and hear them. But then at the end of the day, it's more guidelines than anything, it seems like, on all of this stuff.
And again, we don't want to be the ones in the crosshairs.
Yeah, I know, I understand that.
And I'll just drop the names because I've worked there, Mounds View, New Brighton, other jurisdictions where they charge a value-based permit for roofing. A roofing permit for residential structure is $500-600. How'd you like to explain that to the residents? And again, that's not equitable to the service that's provided. So that's where I feel very comfortable following the rules that are out there. Whether you agree with them or disagree them, they're there. And like you said earlier, I had the ability to go to LA a couple of weeks ago to see how this process really unfolds. It was really interesting, to see how the proposals are come up. They debate those proposals, we vote on them, and then they make a decision. So to be part of that process is a little empowering. It's a political, of course, but to go down there, and I'm gonna go again, just because if my dad always used to say, if you don't like something, try to fix it. Don't just sit there and grumble about it. So Barry, our assistant building official, and I, we went to LA for 4 or 5 days. And we went to the hearings, and we got to vote on different things. It was really fascinating to see the fire code provisions for Northern California into Oregon, where they have all the wildfires, and the conversations over sprinkler systems on the top of the roof to wet the roof so it doesn't catch on fire. So there's a lot of thought that goes behind these, whether we agree with it or not. It is helpful to be part of that conversation, I thought.
And if I could, I can't speak to what the increases will exactly do to our permit prices for new homes and what the response will be, but I can say that currently we definitely are very affordable for new home permits, so.
I'm not as worried about the new home permits. I think I agree with Steve on that, but the people that are gonna be replacing stuff in their house or adding on to their existing house, I mean, they already pay taxes and they're already a valuable member of our city. And I just think it's a bad feeling when you're like, well, I gotta pay $300 to pull a permit for that, it's just doesn't make sense to people. Builders, I think, understand it more so.
So just for clarification, because the building fee schedule is so large, would you like to see deck permits, basement finishes? Like, what would you like me to show you for comparables? Because I think it might be daunting to show you 5 other fee schedules.
Yeah, we don't need to see everything, yeah. Right.
Yeah.
What would be the most common that you guys deal with for, maybe people renovating their homes? Basement, deck?
Basement, decks, and then, well, like you spoke to, is the maintenance permits. Roofing, siding, windows, water heaters, water softeners, furnaces, things of that nature. That's probably the highest volume on existing homes. People get into their home, in a couple of years, they're gonna build a deck. A couple of years later, they might finish that basement. So you're right in line with what we can predict those existing homes to experience, like you say, with the deck. So that's pretty predictable.
So those would be the best ones for our staff to probably look into, because, I mean, we're gonna get the most of those, so people might, I don't know.
That's That's good. It's just good to have direction, because I think otherwise it'll be way too much information.
You couldn't get back here in 6 months with all that information.
And again, I would caution us for putting too much stock into a neighboring jurisdiction that issues a water heater permit for $50, because they're subsidizing that from somewhere.
How
Or
about
they're-
That's
patios?
what- I
Or
guess
they're
that-
not
that
getting
was-
charged
that
as
was a
much.
good lead into my question, because where are they subsidizing it from then, and can we do that too? You know, I
And
mean,
that's
it-
interesting, you know, as we get more and more into the municipal fee report to the DLI and things of that nature, it's that the rules are there, but the level of accountability and the accounting maybe is not. So I don't know, I can't speak for Blaine, example, but.
But you said, and I think you said something along the lines that they have a flat fee for their deck permit, and they make it low so that it's, but technically, they really can't do that either, right?
They're
But
not supposed to, no.
But you could negotiate on the value per square foot as far as just saying, okay, well, the deck, a wood deck would be at this price, and, you know, maybe that's where there'd be some wiggle room, or?
I don't
hard
know,
to-
and I don't know, again, how Blaine is able to do that. It's
Yeah.
exactly contrary to what the code says. That's just black and white. They're not following the code. How they get by with that, there's probably bigger fish to fry.
Yeah.
You know, there's not too many people complaining, but again, if anybody did have a concern to say, your deck of, 10 by 20 costs this much money, and that's the same fee as your deck, which is a front entry of a little 8 by 8 platform.
Sure.
I don't know how they explain that disparaging. I don't know.
Sure.
I'd rather be accountable to the code and the way we see things that need to be done than to follow what somebody else is doing, because I don't know that they're following the rules. And in this case, they're not.
And one of the things that I would really encourage too, any of you that do hear complaints as far as high fees, I have not received any of those phone calls. None of them have been referred to me. Again, part of what we do out, either our inspectors out in the field or administration, I'm the appointed administrator for the city of Isani. I would love to have those conversations so that I can hear your residents' concerns and be able to maybe clarify if there is a misunderstanding, or again, educating and informing on the why behind a lot of those fees. Sometimes a good education helps. I don't like paying, I've been doing this for a really long time. I just put in a brand new air conditioner last year. I didn't like paying that fee, right? None of us do. But, it was a $7,000 unit that was put in. And so that $100 permit I had to pay. So, again, I think it's a lot of that educating and informing as well.
And thank you for saying that, because if there are concerns, oh, boy, that's too heavy, well, let's talk about that, because again, the codes are minimum standards for worst-case scenarios. And if somebody doesn't know the reasoning, the why behind the what, I'd love to have that audience. I'd love to show them. If you've ever looked at our website, we have a whole catalog of informational handouts that talk about carbon monoxide alarms, smoke alarms, handrails, guardrails, all that. We'd love to give that information out, because it explains the importance of this. We're not only helping you with your home, but again, the next people that are gonna live there. Fair enough?
Steve, did you have a question on paper permits?
Yeah, I already talked to him about it. He said there's somebody here every day. Bring it in. I'll just drop it off.
'Cause I know that.
Stephanie's
that has
laughing
been-
because she knows I hate that. No, he said just bring it in, drop it off. He's here every day. If I would've known he was here tonight, I would've brought it with me. But
We do have inspectors in the area every day. If staff ever tells us that somebody dropped off a piece of paper or whatever, we can always grab it and scan it. They can scan it and email it to us. Not everybody operates with the computers. I mean, a lot of people, one on your hip, one in your car, they're everywhere. But yeah, those people that prefer to work with paper and pencil, we can still help with that.
I think you guys have kind of a state-of-the-art system, don't you?
We're really rolling with that base.
Pretty proud of it, I'd imagine, right?
Well, we are. It's really a lot, it's a lot of work, but boy, it was made by the user for the user, and it's really striking a chord. Yep.
So Steve's wanting to go back to paper, he's gotta go the old route, but.
I am old.
And we can certainly accommodate.
But it is that, I do know that has been a concern for residents, is they'd like, some of them just don't wanna do a computer, so I mean, it's,
And I think you're right,
Yeah.
Mayor, we should do a better job of publicizing that, because you didn't know that. On our website, we should have somewhere is that if you have paper and pencil, let us know. You can still lick a stamp and mail us stuff.
Sure.
The really old-fashioned way. But nonetheless, again, all of our jurisdictions, we're there pretty much every day. So if somebody leaves something for us, we can always have the field inspector stop and pick it up. So we should do a better job of advertising that.
well, and I feel like we've told people, though, that they can't do a paper application, it has to be online, and
We
then,
usually can help people through it.
Yeah.
if we need to. We haven't had very many complaints about it usually. We're pretty friendly around here and help people apply, and they like to.
I know that's
Thank
true,
you for
but
that, that's a good point. More often than not, we can help walk people through that process, and they see, well, it's not so bad. But when we do come across a customer that's adamant, it's better off just to take the paper.
yeah. Satisfied with that? Okay. All right, well, yeah, let us look at some comparables, just so we know, you know, but I think, I mean, you guys are really detailed, you work hard. I think, you know, we appreciate the service that you guys have provided, and it's, you know, just something we've got an obligation to make sure we're, you know,
Absolutely.
competitive on pricing, and so,
I appreciate your vote of confidence, thank
Yeah,
you.
and thank you for having that oversight.
yeah, absolutely.
Lastly, is I've come to a lot of council meetings. I haven't had that in-depth of a conversation on cannabis before, much less fluoride. No, I'm serious. You know, you guys get really deep into
We
the
talk
subject.
about stuff.
I see that, and I go to a lot of meetings, and I really gotta commend you because you guys get deep.
Well, thank you. That's what we're here for.
Do our job. Thanks,
I'd
guys.
just like to add, we will bring this back to council. I'll bring it back to council, so then you guys can decide to move forward or not
Okay,
at that
yeah,
time.
that
if
sounds good,
works.
yeah.
Okay.
All right. Let's see here, get this computer back awake here, and we are moving on to E6, the proposed 2025 operating and capital budgets review.
All right, so we've talked about this a few times, and next time you guys see the budget, it'll be on December 3rd, Truth and Taxation meeting, right? That'll be final adoption of the budget, the levy, all that kind of fun stuff. So this is just, you know, the next sequence of updates in the operating budget since October cow. Since October cow, I've taken out the township road maintenance out of the general fund. We confirmed with the township they aren't gonna do it, so we're not matching, so we don't need to put it in there. We've got a new staffing change that you guys approved the last time, so that, we had to retweak that kind of, that stuff. I had an error, formula error on PD uniform pay. For whatever reason, all my other wage-related, compensation-related formulas pulled through, that one didn't, but fortunately caught that. Street training, that was another formula error, that was a much smaller amount. We also took the Initiative Foundation contribution out of the EDA. Stephanie and I have talked about it, and we're no longer convinced that we're getting anything, we're not getting what we need out of that. So, I mean, unless council really wants to be in it, as far as we're concerned, we should be done.
I was gonna propose being done with that as well.
Yeah. On the capital budget and the street plan, I've got a update on state aid requests when we moved our, when we regrouped our street projects. There are only certain roads, and Jason and I just got which roads are state aid and which portions are eligible incorrect. Once we reduce that request by 200,000, we're still in a perfectly fine spot. That levy amount does not need to change. It will work, but it is a change that is in the document.
I did have a question briefly on that. Whiskey Road north of Heritage, that's up for, I believe, is it a resurface or a whole redo soon, correct? Is it next year? Is so that's state aid generally? Is there?
Whiskey Road?
Yeah, Whiskey Road north of Casey's now, the north
Oh.
side of Heritage there. It's getting pretty
Oh,
rough, and I
yeah.
thought I saw that it was getting
Yeah, okay.
repaved or something. That's a
All right.
state aid road, correct? Or, I mean, how does that work? Are those, someone asked me if they were gonna be assessed.
I was gonna say, that's a county road, but no, not north of Casey's.
So assessments are only on reconstructs, right? So the regular maintenance, mill and overlay or seal coats, no,
Okay,
that's not it.
I think it was a mill and overlay on that.
If we had queued it up for 25, yes,
Okay,
that's what
Okay.
that would be.
someone asked, and I was like, I don't remember how that works with assessments.
No, only reconstructs, and so basically it's, you know, once every assuming everything lasts, as long as we have good bit mix along the way, all those kinds of things, it's once every 40 years, you're gonna end up with a new road and an assessment associated with it.
Got it,
And-
okay.
And if we continue to do things the way we're doing, everybody will get hit once every 40 years.
So that's assessed even if it's a state aid road?
Yep.
Okay,
Yep, on reconstruction, and remember, we continue to do that is for a few reasons. Is one is the two angriest people on the planet are the last person to pay an assessment or the first person to pay an assessment. And the other reason you want to do that is that you want to preserve your ability to bond in the future if needed. Now, we aren't planning to do that, and I'm really confident we're going to make it well into the 2050s without having to do that for roads. But I'm not going to be here forever, you guys aren't going to be here forever, and God only knows what might happen. If that happens, if you are going to bond, you do have to assess 20% of the project as a minimum. So, again, that's when that folds into, if we've already done away with assessments, and now 20, 30 years from now, we have to bond, and we have to roll out an assessment that nobody has paid in forever, that is a really, really unpopular thing. In the interim, all those assessments keep going back into the same pot and help fund the fact that we aren't going to bond, right? Everybody's gonna pay their assessment once every 40 years, everybody's gonna pay their portion of the tax levy along the way, and so long as we don't bond, we continue to do the buy three, get one free, which is a really, really big deal. A really, really big deal. So,
okay,
does that clarify?
yep.
So, all right, so in that summary, what we approved in September for the preliminary budget, we had about $160,000 that we were gonna use for fund balance. Where we sit now, today, if we change nothing else, what I would submit on December 3rd for final, we're at $197,000. So we're about $38,000 difference from before. Not, it's not nothing, but it's not a wild change either, the fund balance. And that'd be against the general fund. What we're looking at here is still flat tax rate, just like we had at the preliminary levy. Mayor Gordon, of course, knows this, right? Once you set that levy, you can't go up, so hence why we did that.
I don't
that
think
way.
it's actually flat. I think it was .01 negative.
Perfect. Well, then
Saw
that's
it on
even,
your- I
that's
saw
even
it on
better.
your paperwork
That's
here.
even better than flat.
Yeah.
Well, we gotta pull the decimals out farther before it, because on Excel, if you show only two spots, it is still looking at the third to round. So, nonetheless,
What was that number that, for the fund balance that we're pulling out of?
197.
197. It had been 159.
So wait, we're pulling money out of the fund balance?
Yep,
So
Yep.
not putting any in this year?
correct.
Okay,
Unless we come under budget.
correct.
Which is generally true.
Yep.
I don't ever
Yeah.
want, I don't ever want to promise
I know.
that, but, I mean, we try to make sure we're budgeting conservatively enough that we can make things fit and that we, our revenues come in a little higher than we budget, expenses come in a little lower than we budget, and
Well, I remember we were looking at like 54%, I want to say, for fund balance, I think,
Yep.
when we decided to go with that route, so.
Yep.
yeah.
And then I got, after this was published, I got, Liquor Store Manager Lusk did find two problems on his budget. One was for somehow I failed to populate office supplies for him, so that would be $2,000. That is what we've given him in the past. I think that's an appropriate amount. Doesn't really change his budget a lot. Also, since we put together these drafts, to be able to take chamber bucks at the liquor store, he needed to join the chamber as a separate organization. So I need to put that in. So that's $400 to put that in. So those are, otherwise, those are the changes, or the latest update, I guess I should say.
So we couldn't use our City of Isani membership for that?
Not if we, how did that go? It was to be listed separately was the,
To be listed separately as the or as
Oh.
the liquor store, which is what we wanted. We don't
Right.
want people to come in here using liquor.
Yeah, I don't-
or bucks for their water bill.
yeah. If you want to use the chamber bucks to buy beer, I'm okay.
Well,
For your
how-
water bill, I'm a little less excited.
I guess well, you're gonna get the money back anyways, though.
Yeah,
Yeah, the chamber still reimburses you the full
Yeah.
amount, so I was just, I brought that forward because I thought it was interesting. I was excited, I got $10 chamber bucks, and I saw that Northbound Liquor was a place I could use it, so I had to go up there, and I used it at their dang liquor store, and I was like, man, we can't be having that. So, I proposed that, but I didn't know that we'd have to pay for another membership. So we'll have to see if it's actually utilized to see
Yeah,
if it's
and
worth
then-
it.
Yeah, and that'll be one of those things where, I think that once we've started down the path, I think you want to give it 12 months to
Yeah,
see how that goes, and that'll be the kind of thing that Keith will look at again next year when we go through budgeting, and if it feels like it's worth it, we'll keep doing it, and if it's not, it'll be like the Initiative Foundation, we'll just
yep, okay.
move on then. So if there's any questions on any of that, there really hasn't, since the last update, we haven't changed anything else on capital, so that's still sitting there the way that is.
Any questions?
I had a couple. All right, we still got line items for the skate park in there and then Clifford playground set.
Oh, for capital?
Yep,
Um,
it's 29,000 each.
Yeah, is that, as far as I know, that should be there.
Shouldn't we be pulling that out?
Yeah, we should be pulling out the Clifford probably
Okay.
for
Well,
this year.
we are replacing that whole thing.
Yes, we're replacing all of it. But the skate park, we'll want to push it back, I would assume. We did use some of it ahead of time, so we used 15 or 17,000, whatever the,
To make those repairs.
for the repairs. We
Yeah.
just pulled it ahead. So we did use that amount, but
And then, is there a way to get, for the, community center, a better bid, or to get a better range of cost for the exterior doors, windows, and siding? It's like $66,000 that's budgeted, but if we could get that narrowed down a little bit better, I think that'd be good.
Is that in the CIP, you're saying?
Yeah, and at
Just
those, and at those dollar amounts, we're gonna get multiple quotes, no matter what, and we're still gonna pick the best price.
That's just getting it
An earmark.
budgeted for that, and if
I
it comes
know.
in less, then it's money that goes back into the.
Well, I don't want to take more than what we have to from the taxpayers, so if
You
we
wouldn't
could
be.
get a better.
It's going back to them. It's just a budgeted amount to
Yeah,
cover
I've-
that, if
I've
it
had-
does come to that.
Yeah,
Think if you-
I've had some advice that I didn't budget enough. I think it will be sufficient, and I think I can squeeze a little bit underneath, but
So you think it's
We will
over,
find- we'll
over
find out.
budgeted for, Jeff?
I think the bids are gonna come under,
Really?
but
Okay. I think some of those, you kind of win some, you lose some, and overall, it's, you know, it's just a guess, the best guess you can have.
yeah, I usually explain it as, I mean, in the end, especially when you're looking out to 20 years, but it would apply to the coming year as well, is we're trying to make sure we're playing the correct game in the correct ballpark, right?
I know.
That get to the end, if I'm off 140,000, I could fix that, but if I'm off 14 million, there's no fixing that, right? So we're gonna make sure we're playing the correct game in the correct ballpark, and we still have a purchasing policy, and we'll get our quotes, and we'll stay in budget, so.
So something like that is what would make up, like, say you have 66,000 budgeted and it comes in at 50, well, there's 16,000 you save that, you know, every year, I think we're like 150,000 or whatever. that-
Yeah, so
yeah.
any amount that's left over, let's just stick with that. There's 16,000 under, and that's just still sitting in there. When we roll out the next year's budget, that is now added to that starting cash balance, and then, again, you readjust your levy, and that's why you want to tweak that levy over years and years and years in small amounts, so you're consistent, rather than, you know, once upon a time when we wanted to budget for capital, it was, you tried to fit, 285,000 into the levy in a single year. Well, like, that means tax rates do this, and nobody likes that. Much better to even that out. Give people at least some measure of certainty. Anything else?
I'm saving all my questions for December 3rd.
Yeah, I knew you would. You pretty much have to, right? I mean, it's gonna be your last one, so.
You know, I mean, I always, I don't know if I have any good ones this year to bring up, but we haven't really talked that much yet. But I do always wait till the last meeting, because you want to get council members motivated to make changes. Having a group full of people sitting in the room, although we may not have any this year, but last year I don't think we had any.
We didn't have any last year
Yeah.
either.
Some years you have none, some years you have 20.
Some years you have 20 people in here.
It depends how good
and-
your council is, that's
Well,
what it comes down
right,
to.
but that's a pretty good motivator when they come up and they say, I want lower taxes and I want them right now. Right? So I've always taken that approach, but we'll see. Maybe we can sit down and we'll come up with something.
You got 2 weeks, don't give
All right.
up yet.
All right. Thank you, Mike. I appreciate all your work on that, so. And I guess this one's probably for you too. E7, water and sewer rate study, review and discussion.
Yeah, so we've brought this up before. Well, you know what, let's do this what I think would be the easy way. Sewer rates, did the sewer rate study, proposed that in July. I've not really given you guys an update on that. We don't have the same issues with future capital, future infrastructure in sewer that we do with water. So I guess the first question is, proposed sewer rates for 2025 was basically a down-the-board consumption, base fee, SAC, sewer access charge. All of them go up 5%, and then 3% for 2026, 2027, 2028. Bear in mind that we hadn't raised those for 3 years, and the 4th year before that, we went down 15%. So I feel like this is sort of the inflationary, at some point, you gotta pick up something for costs going up. Do we feel like that is an agreeable?
So I have a question on the consumption rate, 25,000 and up. So how do you determine how much sewer someone uses versus how much water that they use? Is it just equal?
It is, but remember is that you're using winter averages, right? So we're gonna look at, what is it, December,
Okay.
January, February, when I know you're not putting water outside. And if somebody was, like they.
What's that 1 meter called
It's not gonna be a common.
Well, but, if they were gonna put a hockey rink in the backyard, they just need to call us and let us know. And we can figure that kind of thing out. But otherwise, it's, what did you use in the dead of winter that we know that water was inside the house? Then you apply that for all the months so that, when Leroy and Elaine are watering their lawn, it doesn't affect their sewer
Okay.
charges. Yeah, so that's how that goes.
So how many, I suppose most people there's a lot less people in that high range in that section than there is in the water usage section because of the watering, okay.
Yes, you generally, if you're in that top tier, you're generally a commercial or industrial business.
Okay,
You're just flat out using a ton of water year round and a ton of it's going down the drain.
so what's the average on that per gallon per household? Is it around the 10,000?
No, I'd say they're all, far and away, the average is under 10,000
Okay.
per household per month.
Okay,
We generally, what is our starting, in code, what is it, 3,600? I want to say is the start. So if you build a home, you have no history, right? And I don't have a winter average to use for you. What is the starting point? If I remember right, it's 3,600.
okay,
And that's not at an all uncommon number. I mean, there's no perfect average, but that's not an uncommon amount.
okay.
Yeah. You would see, it'd be very hard to see any residential customer in anything other than that bottom tier. Sorry, not 36.
Yeah, I can live with that. I mean, like you said, I don't think we had any increase at all. Well, yeah, I got it right here, so.
Yeah, you do, in the packet there, you do have going back to 2016, the rates. 2017, there was a 50% cut in the base rate. Big cut in 2018 in the SAC charge. We did a big cut again in consumption rate in 2021 and a little smaller cut in the base rate in 2021 as well. And then after that, we just,
Yeah, so we dropped it 15% in '21 and then 0% for the next 3 years. I
yeah.
mean, at some point, you gotta
Yep.
get back to reality, so.
Yep,
so I think that's a reasonable. So
Yeah.
if council's okay with that,
yep.
that's what we'll come back and present for council.
Yeah.
All right, that was a little easier. Now water rates. Now this is the one where I've come back to you guys a few times, giving you update on future infrastructure, the kind of the dire situation we're in unless we get per capita use to drop. I think we're making progress on that, but it's gonna take some time to really know. In the meantime, we do have to move forward with well 4 just keep trucking forward until we find other information that says we can back off on that. We we need to keep moving forward. Even with the highest rates here that I've recommended, also remember is that unless that per capita rate gets back down there, there are going to be 2 water revenue bond issues in the future, each of about $5.5 million, even with these increases. And the only way we're going to avoid that is people need to use less. Hopefully, Jim's, water utility, utility manager Jim's efforts with businesses will give us a multi-year, a sustained reduction in usage, but
I'm not that optimistic on that. I think we still need to do more.
yeah, and that's where it's like, we're gonna have to wait and see. There are gonna be some that, especially some of these businesses that were really putting down high amounts of irrigation, some of them, I think they genuinely appreciated saving so much money. I think they will continue. Others, if they have their irrigation guy come and, set them up in the spring and make sure there are no leaks, all that kind of stuff, and they change the settings, I think there are a lot of business owners that won't double check it at all. And we'll have to see how that goes. That's where I'm most concerned. I've got, at the back of this item, right before we get to F1, I got the very short cheat sheet, right? The most summarized version. There's all the detail within the rate study, but we had originally talked about in 2025 water consumption going up 5% and then 3% in subsequent years, and that base fee going up 14%, right? And remember that 14 is just $2. It's not that's how I came up with 14.4%. And then 3% each year after, and then WAC 5% in the first year and 3% the year after. Problem is that the way I look at it, I think that by the time we get to the end of 2028, cash available for capital improvements is going to be negative $100,000. I'm not. That's when I would talked about. I normally when I make a rate recommendation, I don't lose any sleep, and that one I was losing sleep. I think we need to get to alternative 1 or to alternative 2, and I would recommend alternative 2. The rate increases are a little bit higher each year, except for the base fee in the first year anyway. But that's the difference between being at $110,000 in the hole on cash available for CIP and being up $175,000. It's not a huge difference between the two, but I think that if we don't start doing a little more now, the potential for higher rate increases in the future grows. I would prefer to mitigate that risk, and if nothing else, even if we have to over the next 20 years collect the exact same amount of money no matter what, whether it's high rates now, whatever, I would rather have that be a little more steady over time rather than trying really, really hard to hold it as low as we can and end up getting stuck where in 2-3 years they go hyperbolic. That will be an uncomfortable thing for a lot of people, I think.
I have a question for you, Mike. So say we were to go with the previously presented rate increases, the 5%, the 14.4 base, and the WAC fee 5%. Have you run any examples where, say, maybe the top tier, the increase is 40%, and see what that does? Because I think if we were to increase the cost so much on the overwatering and the overusage that it'd force their hand to stop using as much, so it'd save our water infrastructure. Have you done an analysis on that to see if that?
So that is sort of built in. Remember, this all includes a 4th tier that we didn't have before, right? So we've talked about that. That's in there. And the assumption that I made was that almost everybody is going to exclude themselves from the 4th tier. Right? So even though I have that tier, and even though I would otherwise collect a lot of money on that tier, I think most people will leave the tier. Now, the benefit in that is in the long-term capital implications.
Yes.
Not in today's revenue then, right? Except I won't really know 5, 10, 15 years out until we get some data on how many people moved. But that is the point, is to have that additional tier, and hopefully nobody enters it. Everybody that finds themselves in it immediately makes a change
But
and exits that tier.
is
And to
the
extent-
rate increase enough for them to notice it and to do that, want to exit that tier? That's, I don't think it is, because if you're going to notice a $20 increase on your bill and you're already paying $200, you know, maybe.
Well, but remember, for anybody that, I mean, remember the homes that we're talking about that are doing, you know, 120,000 gallons in a month, they're not paying $200. I mean, they're paying $800-900.
Okay, yeah, so is this little change going to be
So-
enough to really affect them?
Well, but if they've entered a new tier, and each of the tiers are separated by 25% segments, so if I'm at 800 and my bill goes up 25%, that is a $200 increase.
Okay,
So, I mean, there does come a point where somebody's got enough money and they don't care. It's very hard to imagine a rate that you can set that is going to change their behavior. At that point, I think what you hope is that you just simply have a small enough number of them that they can't tip the scale for the whole city infrastructure. Right now,
Right.
we just have relatively small, you know, we had about 40 roughly residential accounts that were really pretty heavy users, but the bulk of it was, in aggregate, was on the commercial side. And a lot of it was irrigation, amazingly. It wasn't the water they were using to run their business, it was the water they were using to make the lawn green outside of their business.
It was
As a-
my
as a
kids.
dude with an economics degree, I
It
wouldn't be
was
recommending that,
it's
but
my kids, Mike. It's my kids that use all the water. They spray that hose and,
you gotta spray a hose for a long time before you get to 120,000 gallons in a month, I'll tell you.
I was
that.
wasn't I one of the 40?
You might have been,
I think I got a letter. I think
Well,
you might
so-
have hand delivered it to me even.
yes,
know.
but there is the whole, remember, when you're first putting down.
That's
I mean,
true.
there's a certain
Yeah,
expectation.
yeah, that's right, because that was
I
at
have-
that time,
I
yeah.
have an expectation that when you build a new home and you've got sod, that is
Yeah.
a roughly $7,000 investment for, for most lots in town.
Yeah.
You do need to put down a bunch of water. You do need to spend money to protect that investment.
Yeah, that's
We don't-
right.
We don't hold that against you. You've been here for 30 years and you're still dropping 120,000
Well,
gallons
yeah,
a month
sure.
is the problem. So,
Yeah, that's right. I forgot that was the time. That was during the drought too, wasn't it? When we took those, we wanted worst case scenario, right? Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, that'll be another part of this too, that none of us are gonna have any say on, is if we don't start getting consistent rainfall in the summer, it makes things tougher. And at some point, we either need people to accept that if it's a drought, your lawn is not gonna be perfectly green, or we're gonna have to eventually give them a financial incentive to, to recognize that, because I mean, there's,
that's where I'm at right now.
at some point, I mean, you have to pay for water infrastructure. It's not a optional thing. I mean,
Do we have 100 or 200 people within the city that use an exceptionally low amount of water?
most people, most residents don't need to do anything different. Most residents are using a awfully reasonable amount. Remember, when I went through in July, and I think we touched on it again in August, right? If you drew a little chart, I mean, you had 10% using 30-40% of the water. The top 20% using 70-80% of the water.
Okay.
Solidly 80% of the residents in town are doing fine. They don't need to change anything. They're being perfectly reasonable and responsible. But it's at the margin, the top 10% of users where that graph goes from perfectly reasonable across 80% of the population to, I mean, just straight through the roof, right at the top. Most residents are doing just fine with their water use.
I was just trying to get at maybe fixed income people that are really keeping their water usage low, and if there's a solid 50 to 150 every single month that are consistently low, if maybe we can break off another tier for just exceptional use and water usage, and it might cover a lot of people that are doing it maybe because they can't afford a larger water bill, and they're conserving to the best of their ability.
Or what if,
Because that's my main concern is some of these water fees going up and people are on fixed income and that extra $240 a year, whatever this works out to be. I just
Yeah, I
should have
wouldn't-
picked a number out of my,
Yeah, I wouldn't expect for, for a, we got a, let's say like a 70-year-old widower, right? Who's, consistently using, 1,200 gallons a month. They're not gonna see $20 increase on this. That's just not how that's, I mean, you gotta remember is that as it sits currently, that bottom tier for water is about 1/3 of a penny a gallon.
so the base fee
Third
is
of-
$2, you said, so it's
Yeah, the base, that would be the
24 a
biggest.
year.
For most, for like a low income, single household, limited budget, but also limited water use, the $2 a month would be like the thing they would notice.
Okay, so 24 plus whatever the 5% might equal $40 a year, maybe?
For those low users that are in that 1,200, which I do see that a fair amount, right? Yeah, I think you'd have a really hard time getting, I mean, you'd probably get past $40, but I don't see anybody getting far past that for the year,
Right,
you know?
okay.
would it be possible to leave that lower tier with no increase and then make up for that increase in the higher tiers? So instead of like a 0% increase, let's say a 0% increase in the bottom tier, because those are, I mean, you probably need that much water to survive, but the people that are in the next tier, there's a 10% increase there. Would that make up for the lower? Because then you have a baseline that's like acceptable. I think that's what George is kind of,
Yeah, and I get that. I think the problem that you're gonna run into is that until we actually have improvement, we still have to collect, right? There still has to be money coming in, and to the extent that you say the lowest users don't have to contribute, the problem is they're the bulk of the pyramid.
right.
If I say, all right, I'm gonna give the bulk of the pyramid, I'm gonna give 60% of the accounts a price break, and the top of the pyramid is gonna pay the bulk. Well, this isn't property taxes, right? Property taxes, I don't have any say, right? I get my bill, that's just it. But with water use, and this is why I'm always more comfortable raising water rates than taxes, is with water rates, there is an opportunity for a person to change a behavior and avoid that fee, right? It's not perfect, and it's not necessarily gonna solve everybody's problems, but there is that opportunity. I can say, I'm not gonna water my lawn every day.
Which would be good for us because it
And-
would extend the life of our infrastructure at the same time. That's
Yeah.
why I think if you hit
So
them harder,
I like I appreciate how you're thinking about that, but I think that if we're gonna give, to the extent that we still need this infrastructure, and we haven't had a sustained enough decrease and a drop in that gallons per capita, until we see that, I don't think we can give that percentage of water users a break where we might, and especially if you give a price break at the bottom and an increase at the top and push even more of them toward that, we might actually collect considerably less than we think we would, intuitively than you might otherwise assume you would.
but it would extend your infrastructure because so many less people will be using the water. But would it extend it
But
enough? That's the question.
Those people are already using less, you know
Yeah,
what I mean? So-
and that's when it's, a bird in hand is better than two in the bush, right? Like, I need to see that that's going to be a true statement.
Okay,
You know what I mean? Before I'm gonna be able to get on board with, yes. Like, I need to see that we are genuinely using less per capita, and this is a sustained thing. Because if it's not, we have to be making progress while we are unsure. Otherwise, the rates are gonna end up getting stuck doing this. And the point when they would really take off like this would be the point when we get ourselves into a real bind and we're not bonding for 5 million, we're bonding for 14 million. And that debt service payment comes due, and that debt service payment is like, 14, you'd pay about, I'm gonna guess, 700,000 a year. And then you're really in a world of hurt, because now
You got a lot of angry people coming.
you got angry people that are paying the bills, but now if you don't make good on that debt service payment, you've got a whole nother cornucopia of problems. And
Well, and one thing to
And it's no
remember
fun.
too, just like we were talking about with the sewer rates, I mean, here you also had a drop 4.9% in 2021 down, and then it's maintained at 0% And at the time, I mean, that was, I mean, I voted for that,
And-
and I think you did too. You
and
know, I
it's-
mean, it was meant to be a relief when people needed it, and I think it was, but at the same time, you have to pay for your infrastructure at some point. I mean,
And at that
And
time, we
for-
didn't have these issues that we have presenting us today.
yeah, the uses per capita was not the same. Exactly, yeah, you're 100% right, yeah.
And building was down here.
Yeah.
And for our lowest users, right, the widower, 70 years old, living on her own, you know, consistently using 8 to 1,200 gallons a month, really frugal user, model water consumer, right? You know, the biggest thing they're gonna notice is the extra $2 on the base rate. But remember is, we dropped that 25% back in 17, and even putting us back to where we are, right? So if we just add that $2, we go to $15.85, that's still $1 less than it was in 2016. I mean, we're still less than what we were once upon a time. I really do want water rates to be low, but at some point, I mean, we just gotta pay for what we gotta pay for, and we're gonna have to, and this is one of those times I think that we really do have to walk and chew gum at the same time. We're gonna have to start collecting additional revenues and continue to try to push those other projects out by getting per capita usage down. We just have to do both until we see a clear path to success on one or the other. We just have to do both.
I'd rather see the rates higher on the higher users. So I'm not sold on just the 5%, and then it's great that you broke it down, but I still think it should be higher on those excessive users, because the only way to stop people from doing something is to hit them where they actually care. They don't care about water conservation. Everybody cares about the economy and what they pay, you know? So if you're gonna decide to water your lawn, it's gonna cost you an extra, you know, $100 a month, and you still okay with that, that's your choice, but I don't think the rest of the people should pay for that when you wanna be wasteful with your water and overwater your lawn. So I would still like to see, I guess, higher on the higher brackets, but I think, as
I
you
mean,
said.
he made an entire,
Yeah.
we're creating an
We're gonna have-
entire higher tier. I
Yeah,
mean,
But that isn't
and
gonna
when you're
solve
looking
the
at the
problem.
history, you don't see that.
Right,
No.
I think it needs
Yeah,
more.
It's not gonna solve the problem.
But neither-
It's gonna be a short-term fix for what you're thinking, but in the long run, it ain't gonna do us any better,
Yeah,
any
the-
good
the
by doing
fourth-
that.
The fourth tier really is, and why I didn't include any additional I basically include no additional revenue from the fourth tier, because my expectation is that almost everyone will exit that tier as soon as they find themselves in it, which the point of the fourth tier isn't even to collect money, it's to get people out. My expectation is most people will exit that tier.
Okay,
As soon as they recognize that, you know, we're talking about, instead of a third of a penny, 2/3 of a penny, I think people will notice. And if they don't, we can come back and revisit this. I mean,
Okay.
we can get to the end of the summer and look at our usage and go, we're not making any progress. And we can change it again, right? We can come back, you know, next September, even though it's not planned, next September and say, gosh, summer was horrible. Everybody's using a ton of water. And that would be the first step
okay.
at that point, is once we have more data, that would be the first step, is all right, and nobody exited the fourth tier? Well, we're gonna have to give somebody an incentive to do so.
And we sent a letter to the 51 accounts that,
Yeah, yep. Yep,
Any
and.
negative
and
feedback
for the
from that?
For the commercial industrial ones, Jim followed up in person, to the extent that he could, otherwise called them all. And Adriel did, mail and call, for everybody that we had,
yeah.
you know, contact information. Some people called back and were super thankful for it. Other people just call them, you don't hear anything, they get a letter, you just never hear anything from them, but.
A lot of people were glad that they stopped by, they didn't even realize they were spending that much, you know, the bill
Well,
goes to
Especially at the
somebody at their
businesses,
accounting office and. you know.
especially at the businesses, they were quite thrilled about it, most of them. So I'm hopeful that we're gonna get through the end of next summer, and we're gonna be able to look at our usage numbers per capita and see a real improvement. Well, we're gonna have to find out. But in the meantime, I think we really do have to do both for now, until there's that clear path.
Yeah, I'm okay with the way you have it drawn up here. The only other thing I think we had talked about in the past was, you know, if there was a certain business that had a high water usage because of the business that they're in, you know, do we want to try to have a carve out for that? And I don't know if there's anything in town that really that would cover right now, but.
Car wash.
Yeah.
Car wash is one.
But that would be the only.
Sort of. I would say this. car washes don't use as much
I
water
thought
as
they were
you think.
exempt.
Oh, I know what the car wash was at Hurricane, what the bill
But-
was there.
But in relative to what I was watching certain businesses put down in irrigation, I mean, we had businesses that were putting down in irrigation, 4 or 5 times what Quick Trip is putting through in their car wash. I mean, that's stunning, but that's just how it is. I mean,
Was Hurricane's usage highest? They have 3 bays or with 6,
no, they're-
4,
no,
there's,
they're lower than others.
okay.
'Cause that bill at Hurricane was more than 4,000 a month,
Oof, yeah, okay.
sewer and water bill.
When was that, though?
It's gotta be,
Did your family have that at some
no, I
point? or-
took care of it for a guy.
Yeah. I remember
It was
since,
$4,000 a month.
yeah, and since
And
then.
the
we-
worst part of it is he's being billed for all that sewer use. But 50% of the water rolls out the vehicle out in the parking lot and runs away.
Yeah.
That's not all that water that gets used in there went down the drains.
Yeah, and and also there's nothing, there's nothing that prevents us from identifying a problem and then just fixing it, right? I mean, the 6 of us can sit and try to think of every possible business scenario, and we probably are not going to get it right, but that shouldn't prevent us from making a good choice in the future if we see a problem. And there would be ways to do that.
Well, and I think
But
the
we
one
would
that
need-
we,
I would
the one
wanna
that we had maybe
see-
discussed in the past is not,
What's that?
the one that we had maybe discussed in the past is not open anymore, right? So that, because I think that
I
was
think
one we
they
maybe
would-
talked about.
If you and I are thinking the same thing currently, and I think we are, they would have been my number one concern.
Yeah, right, yeah. Yeah, so that was the one I think we
Yeah,
had
and I-
mentioned in the past, but I don't, other than
And
that, I don't.
Yeah, and I think at some point, it's just sort of, I mean, for this, I would go forward with these rates, but then recognize that, like, no matter how hard the 6 of us try to come up with every scenario, it ain't gonna happen. And let's just not be stubborn about it. If there is a problem, let's fix it and address it, not dig in our heels, right? And we can fix things at any time. So,
What's the
I
number?
agree- I agree with Luke on this, but I think it's inevitable. I think we all know that that well is, one of them at least is gonna be in our real near future. And I'll tell you what, if we got a bond for this thing, our taxes are gonna, people's taxes are gonna go up, but this is one way we can control those taxes that have been creeping up faster than we want.
Yep.
And I think that this isn't unrealistic at this point. You're looking at probably, most households are probably gonna see $50, $60 on an average, an increase a year.
Next year, but in 3 years, double that again. How many water users do we have within this city? How many bills do you send out each month?
2,200 accounts.
2,274 or something, it's probably somewhere in that.
That's the number of households, but then we have all the small business and,
I'm trying to think of the Department of Health report that I send in quarterly that asks for water connections,
oh,
right? So it's basic, yeah, it's not quite what you're asking, but that's the best thing that I have in my head that I'd have to look.
It's probably
at.
pretty close, because is that, in an apartment building, it's just one water connection, right? So you have all the houses, but not.
Yeah, you don't count, you don't count each, like 48 units in an apartment building, you don't count 48
You're
units.
what- Yeah, you're.
So that would
you're
make
going
up for
off
the
of, yeah.
businesses. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and and that's the other thing too is, that, we could think about this, I don't think we need to, but, apartment buildings, if you have, 28 units, your tiers move by 28. Right, so you're not, apartment building with 49 units isn't gonna automatically, oh, well, they're always in the top tier because they have 48 units. You get tiered in, right? So it's, each unit gets treated like a household,
Ah,
right? I mean, because otherwise, a 48 unit apartment
They'd be in the
building,
upper
that-
tier
that
every
bill-
time.
I mean, that bill would be $20,000 a month. I mean, it would be just, it'd be blindingly high. So just out of curiosity, I mean, I'm sure somebody has
I did wonder
Wondered
that,
about
and I
that,
just
yeah.
figured it had to have been like that, but it's good to know.
Just, yeah.
Yeah, so what's what do you guys think? I mean, it's not something anybody wants to do, but like I said, it has
I
been
think
drastically
alternative two
dropped
is
in
it. I
recent
think it's the
history.
only way to address it. And I do agree with George is saying, but if you sit and look at it, you look at it being 1585 to 1732 by 2028. It isn't really that huge of an increase in those 4 years pattern there.
Inflationary almost, really.
It's basically
Yeah.
inflationary. I mean, unfortunately, and I'm guilty of it, when we sat on all that infrastructure across on the other side of 65, when our water rates and sewer rates were way up here. As soon as that infrastructure was finally paid for, which should have never been put on the city to start with.
Correct.
That was long before my time, because I would have never voted for that. But as soon as that was taken care of, we were so excited to do this. But at that time, there wasn't a building that was going on. We weren't having any issues with the wells. Now, it's on the other side. The building is going up. We're getting more people using water. We've had dry weather. We've had businesses that are overexerting their water, but we have to do what's gonna be financially smart for our residents. This is a lot better than jumping their taxes 6%, 6, 7, 8%. This is doing it to pay for it, so we don't have to raise their taxes.
And they have the choice.
Yep, you can cut back on your water use.
Exactly, you can't cut back on what you're taxed, you have to pay it no matter what, you have no control over it, yep.
This, you can have a choice, you
Yep.
can control your water. I agree with you at a certain point for tier 4, but like Mike
See
said.
what happens.
It drops, all of a sudden they drop off of that. And by raising them and not raising anybody else didn't do us any good.
Yeah, the fourth tier functionally isn't really meant to make money. It's just an incentive to move you.
Correct.
To lower your usage, so.